Hey Reddit, I've been lurking here for a while, and after reading so many inspiring stories, I felt like it was time to share my own. It's a story about dreams, setbacks, and starting over. More times than I can count. If you're feeling stuck or thinking it's too late to chase your goals, I hope this resonates with you. Let me start by taking you back to my college days. Back then, I had my life all mapped out. The plan was simple. Graduate, join the US military, and become a pilot. Flying had been my dream since I was a kid, and I was convinced the military was my ticket to making it happen. Everything was on track until my junior year, when life decided to throw a massive curveball. The diagnosis that changed everything. One random afternoon during my junior year, I got diagnosed with celiac disease. For anyone who doesn't know, celiac is an autoimmune condition, where your body pretty much declares war on gluten. It's manageable with a strict diet, but here's the kicker. The military doesn't accept people with it. That diagnosis didn't just mess up my eating habits, it completely derailed my future. Just like that, my dream of becoming a military pilot was dead. I remember sitting in the doctor's office, staring at the paperwork, trying to wrap my head around what this meant. My entire plan hinged on military service. Without it, how the hell was I supposed to afford flight school? The US government wasn't exactly handing out free pilot training to civilians. I felt lost. No, scratch that. I felt completely adrift, graduating into uncertainty. When I graduated college, I had no idea what to do with myself. To make matters worse, my degree wasn't exactly setting me up for a lucrative career. I won't say it was useless, but let's just say no one was banging down my door to offer me a six-figure job. I floated around between jobs, trying to find some kind of direction. I worked in restaurants and bars, slinging drinks and serving plates. I tried my hand at working in a gym, did some over-the-phone sales, which was as soul-crushing as it sounds, and even spent some time in the school system. Every job felt like a dead end. I wasn't building toward anything. I was just surviving, paycheck to paycheck, wondering if this was all my life was going to be. The decision to become a cop. Eventually, I decided to try something more stable. I applied to become a police officer. The consistent pay, benefits, and the promise of a pension made it seem like a smart move. Plus, the idea of having a job where I could eventually retire and maybe not have to work into my 70s was appealing. To my surprise, I was good at it. Like, really good. I worked hard, moved up quickly, and gained respect from my peers. For the first time in years, I felt competent and valued in my work. But here's the thing. Even though I was doing well, there was this nagging feeling in the back of my mind that I couldn't shake. I still felt like I was underachieving, like I wasn't living up to my potential. Even though I'd built a decent career as a police officer, I couldn't stop thinking about the one thing I'd always wanted to do: fly. Ever since I was a kid, I'd been fascinated by airplanes. My dad used to take me to air shows when I was little, and I'd sit there with my eyes glued to the sky, watching fighter jets scream overhead. It wasn't just about the machines themselves, it was about the freedom they represented. Flying wasn't just a dream, it felt like my dream. But after the celiac diagnosis, I'd buried that dream. I told myself it wasn't realistic without the military footing the bill for flight school. Life moved on, and I convinced myself that maybe being a cop was enough. Except, it wasn't. That nagging feeling. The thing about a dream like flying is that it doesn't just disappear. It sits there, quietly in the back of your mind, waiting for moments of silence to remind you it's still there. Some days I'd be sitting in my patrol car, staring up at the sky during a break, watching a plane leave contrails across the blue, and I'd think, what if? What if I'd figured out a way? That question started to eat at me. It wasn't like I hated being a cop. I was good at it, and the job gave me stability. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I was settling, that I was living a life that wasn't mine, the moment I decided to go for it. One night after a long shift, I found myself sitting at my kitchen table, scrolling through my phone. I stumbled across a thread about people who had changed careers later in life, and one comment hit me like a ton of bricks. You're never too old to chase a dream. The only thing stopping you is you. I read that line over and over again. It was simple, maybe even cliché, but for some reason, it felt like someone had flipped a switch in my brain. I realized I'd been making excuses for years. Sure, there were obstacles, money, time, uncertainty, but deep down, I knew the real reason I hadn't gone after my dream. I was scared. Scared of failing. Scared of starting over. Scared of stepping out of the comfortable life I'd built. That night, I made a decision. I was going to chase the dream, no matter what it took. Taking the leap. The first step was figuring out how to pay for flight school. Without the military covering the costs, I knew I'd need to take out a loan. It felt risky, terrifying even, but I'd spent years living within my means and slowly building my credit, and for the first time, I felt like I was in a position to make it work. I quit my job as a police officer, took out my first ever loan, and applied to flight school. That decision came with sacrifices. I had to move to a new town with no income and no safety net. I sold almost everything I owned: furniture, electronics, anything I didn't absolutely need. I kept my car and a few essentials and packed up what little I had left, starting over at 33. At 33 years old, I was starting from scratch. I moved into a tiny apartment that was just barely within my budget, and my diet became a rotation of rice, beans, and gluten-free PB&J sandwiches. I'm not exaggerating when I say every dollar had to be accounted for. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't easy. But for the first time in a long time, I felt excited. I'd wake up in the morning with a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years. Starting flight school at 33 felt like stepping into a whole new world. After years of being a cop and working steady jobs, suddenly I was the rookie again, surrounded by people who were younger, more experienced, or both. It was humbling, to say the least, but it was also thrilling in a way I hadn't experienced in years. First days in flight school. Walking into my first day of training, I was equal parts nervous and excited. The classroom was filled with people from all walks of life, some fresh out of high school, others with a few years of aviation experience under their belts. And then there was me, the guy who sold almost everything he owned just to be here. Our instructor started the session with a line I'll never forget. Flying is equal parts art and science. You'll need to master both if you want to make it in this industry. And that really stuck with me because I'd never thought of flying as an art before. To me, it had always been about precision, skill, and control. But the more I learned, the more I realized how much intuition, adaptability, and confidence play into being a good pilot. The first flight. The first time I got into the cockpit of a small training plane, it felt like I was living a dream. Sitting there with the headset on and the controls in front of me, I had this moment of clarity. This is it. This is what I've been chasing all these years. Of course, the actual flight was far from perfect. My instructor handled most of the work while I tried to absorb everything. My hands were shaky on the yoke, and I made a million little mistakes. But I didn't care. Just being up there, soaring over the town, made every sacrifice feel worth it. The challenges of flight school. Don't get me wrong, flight school isn't all blue skies and smooth landings. It's a grind. There's a ton of classroom work, learning aerodynamics, weather patterns, navigation, and the intricacies of FAA regulations. I spent hours poring over textbooks and flight charts, trying to memorize everything I could. And then there's the practical side, learning to maneuver the plane, handle emergencies, and communicate with air traffic control, all while keeping your cool. There were moments when it felt overwhelming. One day, during a particularly tough flight lesson, my instructor had me practice stalls, deliberately letting the plane lose lift so I could learn how to recover. The first time it happened, my stomach dropped, and my mind went blank. For a split second, I froze, gripped by panic. My instructor calmly talked me through it, and I managed to pull out of the stall, but I couldn't stop thinking, what if I can't handle this? What if I'm not cut out for this? Learning to embrace the process. That day taught me something important. Flying, like life, isn't about never making mistakes. It's about learning how to recover when things go wrong. I started to approach each lesson with a little more patience. Instead of beating myself up over every misstep, I focused on what I could learn from it. Gradually, I started to see progress. My landings got smoother, my confidence grew, and I began to feel like I was actually becoming a pilot. Rediscovering passion. The best part of this whole journey has been rediscovering what it feels like to be truly passionate about something. After years of working jobs that didn't excite me, waking up every morning with a sense of purpose feels incredible. I still live on a tight budget. Rice, beans, and gluten-free PB&Js are basically my entire diet, but I don't mind. Every day I get to do something I love, and that's worth more than any paycheck. Flight school has been one of the most challenging things I've ever done, but it's also taught me a lot about life, especially how I think about risk, failure, and success. Before I took this leap, I used to see life as a series of safe choices. You pick a path, stick to it, and hope for the best. But chasing my dream of flying turned all of that on its head. Taking a leap isn't as reckless as it seems. Quitting my stable job as a police officer to pursue flight school felt like the riskiest decision of my life. There were nights when I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering if I'd just made the biggest mistake ever. I'd think about my old job, consistent paychecks, benefits, a retirement plan, and compare it to my current situation. No income, a pile of debt, and a fridge stocked with the cheapest food I could find. But here's what I've realized. The bigger risk would have been not trying at all. Staying in a job that didn't fulfill me might have been safe, but it wasn't what I wanted for my life. I didn't want to wake up 10, 20, or 30 years down the road wondering, what if? Failure isn't the end. It's part of the process. When you're learning to fly, failure isn't just possible. It's inevitable. You're going to mess up. You're going to have days where nothing clicks, and you feel like you're regressing instead of progressing. There was one flight lesson in particular that felt like a complete disaster. My instructor had me practice crosswind landings, and I just couldn't get it right. The plane kept drifting off course, my approach was shaky, and every landing felt worse than the one before. By the end of the lesson, I was so frustrated I could barely look my instructor in the eye. But as we debriefed, he said something that stuck with me. Every good pilot has a story about their worst landing. That's how you get better. That hit me hard. It reminded me that failure isn't a sign you're not cut out for something. It's proof that you're pushing yourself, that you're learning. Success isn't about perfection. For most of my life, I thought success meant achieving something big. Landing a dream job, hitting a milestone, or reaching the top of your field. But this journey has taught me that success is less about the destination and more about the effort you put in along the way. Right now, my success looks like making it through each flight lesson, passing my exams, and sticking to my tight budget so I can keep pursuing this dream. It's not glamorous, but it's meaningful. Every time I walk out of the flight school, I feel a little more confident, a little more capable. That's success, even if it's happening in small, incremental steps. The freedom of letting go of the right path. Before I started this journey, I spent years trying to follow a path that made sense. Graduate college, find a good job, build a stable career. But somewhere along the way, I realized there's no such thing as the right path. Life isn't linear. Sometimes you take detours, and sometimes you have to start over completely, and that's okay. Letting go of the idea that I was too old or too late to chase my dream was one of the most liberating decisions I've ever made. It gave me the freedom to define success on my own terms, not based on what society says I should be doing by a certain age. Looking back on this journey, I can confidently say that taking the leap to chase my dream of becoming a pilot was one of the scariest, most rewarding decisions I've ever made. It wasn't easy, and there were plenty of moments when I questioned if I was doing the right thing. But now, standing where I am, I've learned a few things that I want to share. It's never too late to start over. I'm 33, living on a shoestring budget, and just now pursuing the career I've wanted since I was a kid. If you'd told me 10 years ago that I'd sell everything I owned to chase a childhood dream, I would have laughed in your face. But here I am. We get so caught up in the idea that we have to figure everything out by a certain age, that there's some invisible deadline for achieving our goals. But the truth is, life doesn't work like that. It's not a race, it's a journey, and it's never too late to change direction. Whether you're 25, 35, or even 55, there's always time to start over. Don't let fear hold you back. If I'd let fear dictate my decisions, I'd still be working as a police officer, quietly resenting my life and wondering what might have been. Fear is always going to be there, especially when you're stepping into the unknown. But I've learned that fear isn't a stop sign. It's a signal that you're doing something that matters. The key is to acknowledge the fear, but keep moving forward anyway. Because on the other side of fear is where the real growth happens. Small sacrifices lead to big rewards. I won't sugarcoat it. This journey has required a lot of sacrifices. I've sold most of my belongings, live in a tiny apartment, and survive on a diet that's more practical than enjoyable. But every time I sit in the cockpit of that training plane, I'm reminded of why those sacrifices are worth it. Sometimes you have to give up certain comforts in the short term to build the life you truly want in the long term. Redefine success on your own terms. For years, I measured success by other people's standards. I thought success meant climbing the ladder, earning a steady paycheck, and having a comfortable life. And while there's nothing wrong with those things, they weren't what I wanted. This journey has taught me that success isn't about fitting into a mold. It's about finding what makes you feel fulfilled and pursuing it wholeheartedly. You're stronger than you think. There were so many moments when I doubted myself, when I thought, I'm too old, too inexperienced, or not good enough. But every time I pushed through those doubts, I proved to myself that I'm capable of more than I ever imagined. You don't have to have everything figured out. You just have to take the first step, and then the next, and then the one after that. The journey continues. I'm not done yet. I still have a long way to go before I can officially call myself a pilot, and there are bound to be more challenges ahead. But for the first time in a long time, I feel excited about what's next. If you've ever thought about chasing a dream, no matter how impossible it feels, I hope this story inspires you to go for it. Because trust me, the hardest part isn't the work, it's deciding to start. Don't let fear, age, or doubt hold you back. Life is too short to settle for anything less than what truly makes you happy. Thanks for reading, and if you've ever taken a leap like this, I'd love to hear your story. Let's keep encouraging each other to take risks and chase the things that matter.